Alright everybody, welcome back to the KSR YouTube channel. As you saw in the thumbnail today, we are working on the Corvette. So the C5 Corvette, we got the other A-pillar bar done. Actually, Drew got that done while I was gone on Friday with my kiddos. And while it looks simple, there's actually some complexity to that, because you've got this bend right here is in one plane. Then you have to rotate it to put that bend in it there. And then there's a third plane to then tuck it back to the main hoop. So it has to make this bend here to get around the seat. And it actually pokes out of the roof, like the roof lands about midway on the bar on each side. And it's a tight fit, because Grant and Chuck that are building this car, same guys that run the silver Miata in the back, they're pretty tall guys. So we're trying to fit and give them as much room, like headspace wise, so that their helmet is as far from the cage as possible. Well, it takes a little bit of special design considerations in the roll cage, but that's what we're going to be working on today. Follow along, going to be some time lapses and some other commentary through it, maybe voiceovers the time lapse. Not 100% sure, but let's get to it. All right, so Drew is outside and he is working on making some plates like we did here. He's making them for these front mounts up here. So the hole right there is where the subframe bolts go through. You know, ties that subframe all to the factory chassis. So we are doing a reinforcement piece around it just like we did back there. And we are going to have a bar that runs from here down to a little pipe that sticks up off of that. So also I'm about to start working on a bar back here. And then we're going to tie from this joint right here down to that bar, and then possibly do some other X trickery back here. Might do a bar down low, not 100% sure yet. But anytime that I am building a roll cage, I try to have like a node, which another word for that is just an intersection point. I guess it's more a phrase than a word. But so this bar lands here, and rather than put the bars that are going to tie down to the back mounts, rather than putting them just here in the middle, we're going to put them so that they are right in line with this joint here. I'm definitely not an engineer. Didn't go to school for anything like that, but in my brain, the way my brain works, if I can intersect straight through and have contact points, if something happens back there, where there's an impact, it's going to transfer the load directly up through other bars that then spread the load around the chassis. I have studied quite a few different cages, everything from rally racing, you know, the new NASCAR Cup cars. So every race car that's got a roll cage in it that I can get my eyes on, I look at it and I take notice of different design features, some that I want to copy, some that I want to avoid, and you know, that's how we kind of develop our cages here at KSR. It's just how we do it. I'm not saying this the right way, not saying this the wrong way, but that's how we do it. And we're pretty particular on making as many bars line up as possible. As you might can imagine, with these bars, they're similar, but if this bar is not perfectly square in the car, which we tried to get it as good as we could get it, that bar wouldn't match over there. And if you look, basically those bars line up on that plane. These bars line up pretty well on that plane. This is a little deceiving here because they're spread apart. You know, like if you're looking at it from up here, that one's going out that way and that one's going out that way from the joint that's right there. And then the back bars there also pretty much on the same plane. According to all the measurements, they're within a couple of tenths of a degree of each other. We're good with that. So I'm gonna get started on making back here, and then doing here, and then like I said, maybe a lower X, or we're gonna do something possibly that ties together across the roof of the car, and then some kind of extra vertical support that is somewhere in here, but that'll be figured out once we do the door bars. Yeah, we've got some stuff to figure out, some bars to make, so let's get to work. Well, if you guys like what you see here on the KSR YouTube channel, and if you're not already a subscriber, please subscribe to the channel. You know, it just helps keep you informed of when we pop out with a new video. And if you even want to click the notification bell, then you'll receive an email or a text when we do release a new video, which that helps us stay relevant in the YouTube algorithm. We super appreciate that. Again, and this seems to happen like every few months. Maybe it's an ongoing thing, but I have gotten a few messages recently of people that were unsubscribed, and I did take a little bit of a break from YouTube earlier in this month. Like, had a really busy month last month doing a lot of videos, and then just had stuff to deal with, you know, during the summer with my kids for July. This was kind of a short summer for them, so we tried to squeeze in some extra little trips over to the beach and stuff, and it just took away some of my editing time. But anyways, please check your subscription if you think you're subscribed, just to double check. And let's get to talking about the roll cage stuff. So you can see now I've actually got that piece out on the bench, and the end goal for this entire roll cage is we are going to break the tack welds where I'm about to re-tack weld this piece to the chassis. We're going to break those, and at every point where the roll cage touches the chassis, we're going to cut those, take it out of the car, and then we're going to take the roll cage itself and have it powder coated. Now, the last probably 2 to 3 inches of the cage will not powder coat, so that way we can re-weld it to the chassis without melting the powder coat, and then we'll just repaint that bottom section once we, you know, put it back in the car and get it all fully welded. So as you can kind of see from my position right now in the car, like in this, I'm not really hampered by too many of the tubes right now, but I'm already having to get twisted up to get to the different angles that I need to get to weld the tube joint completely. And yes, it would be a lot easier to weld some of these joints once the cage was out of the car, but basically we're using the car as a jig, since, you know, the anchor or the landing points are already welded to the chassis. We're using those kind of like a jig, and the idea is to weld as much of the roll cage as possible while the cage is still attached to the jig. So if you guys don't know this, whenever you're welding something, chances are it's going to pull the tube one direction. So if you leave a lot of unwelded joints and then you take it out of the car, when you fully weld every single joint, the cage may not be exactly the same shape as it was when it was in the car last. So just a little tip if you guys are doing something like this, or even just welding in general. If you're like, say for the harness bar that goes across the middle of the car there, I know that if I don't have a super good fit up when I weld that, and even when I do weld it, like, it's going to pull the bottom legs of the main hoop together a little bit. Now, sometimes it's not much. Some with the thicker tubing, it seems to be a little bit more because you're putting more heat into the bar or more heat into the base metal. But that's something we definitely notice happens. And a lot of times we're trying to fit cages really tightly to the body, like this car, for example. You know, it's basically touching the roof through the center part of the car so that we can try to give the drivers as much room in the car. So just a little bit of, you know, roll cage theory and design. And, you know, here I am all twisted up and up inside of the car to weld the underside of this joint
where the rear downstays land on the chassis anchor point. But that's just part of this game. You got to get twisted up to get inside of these things and be able to weld as much as possible. A lot of times you'll see me stop and I adjust the tungsten stick out length because I try to keep the tungsten up tight in the TIG torch unless I need it to be hanging way out, because the farther the tungsten hangs out, the more likely, a passing breeze is going to blow away your shielding gas. So I try to keep the tungsten in short unless I absolutely have to have it out to reach up inside of a valley or something like that where the tubes come together on a big angle and I need to really hang the tungsten way out. I use a 14 cup most of the time, and by using the 14 cup you can kind of crank the gas flow way up and get really good shielding coverage even with the tungsten hanging out an inch and a half out of the cup. So like I said, it's not ideal to do that because sometimes you end up with a little bit of a breeze can blow away your shielding gas, and then you just contaminated your weld and you've got to go back and kind of grind that part out and redo it. But if you can kind of manage that breeze, or there's not any breeze because there's no fans blowing in the shop or anything like that, you can manage to do that and get away with it and still have a really good weld that's covered completely by the shielding gas. So let's talk about what we just did in real time.
Well, that's quite a bit of progress for the afternoon. And if you noticed, I drilled 2 holes right there. Actually broke a drill bit off in that one, knocked it back out. But the reason for that is because as you weld to this bar, the gases inside of it are expanding, and if you get the 100% of the tube thickness hot enough to be liquefied, the pressure inside will blow out right in your face, right on your welder, right on your TIG torch. It's not good. And from here, there's actually going to be a bar that goes across, ties to the the windshield bar, and there's kind of going to be an X right here in the middle of the roof. It'll all make sense once it comes together, but we've got a roll bender that we're going to use to put like a radius in this bar so it's not straight, because that way we can make it fit the roof line really well, like for where the windshield opening is, and then we'll have little tabs that come off the cage that the windshield bolts to. That's the idea anyways. So some of this stuff you kind of gotta see it before you make it, and that can sometimes lead you down a path where you have to go back and redo some things, and that's not fun, but it happens. So like you saw earlier, we had a couple of shots at this bar, but it matches up nice now. All matches up nice. So I'm gonna hop back on the welder, weld this last bar in, and I may start working on an X. We're gonna do an X that lands here and then goes over to that joint there. So if the car takes a hit in the door, it transfers the load across the car. Just to kind of spread the load out. Because kind of the way this thing is with the carbon fiber roof, there ain't no structure in that. So the roll cage is going to be it. And even though they're going to have a pretty small engine in this thing for now, they put a big motor in it, it'll go real fast. Because it should be pretty light. Yeah, that's going to be fun. All right, we'll get back to work. Even though it was nice taking a break because it's super humid and I'm soaked like I just jumped out of a swimming pool. Anyways.
All right, now you can see we've got the extra main hoop supports completely fabricated, and now I'm going to be welding them in the car. Typically, I weld a little bit on each end of the tube. So I'll weld a little bit at the top, weld a little bit at the bottom, and kind of bounce around a little bit. Not always do I do that, but that's kind of my goal most of the time, just to try and keep heat out of the joints. And that is especially true on the thinner tubing, like the thinner wall tubing. So this extra piece we're working on right now is actually smaller diameter, and it is thinner wall than the main roll cage structure, which is 1.75 inch outside diameter, and the wall thickness is 0.95. This extra brace we're adding is 1.25 inch 0.58 wall, so lighter tubing because it's more of a secondary support structure than the actual main roll cage. If the front down bars and these rear diagonals were at the highest point of the car, like they were up higher on the main hoop, I would have done these inner diagonals that I'm welding now. I would have also done those out of thinner tubing, but the way this car lays out, the A-pillar bars are kind of outside of the driver's head because that's where they had to be, because there simply wasn't enough room to put them higher in the car and clear the roof and clear the driver's head. So they're outside but kind of level with the driver's head, and then these inner diagonals and the roof X are actually going to be the high point of the car. So that's why we've done those out of 1.75 inch. You know, same as the rest of the roll cage, because I want them to be just as strong as the rest of the roll cage, because kind of like I said, when we're building these things, we're kind of thinking of, you know, a crash that the car may endure. Now, granted, we can't think and plan for every single crash possibility out there because, you know, obviously you can still get hurt in the most well-built race car that is out there. I mean, for example, I don't know if you guys watch much NASCAR, but my old buddy Kurt Busch, we'll leave that buddy in quotation marks, you know, air quotes, buddy Kurt Busch. Anyways, in his NASCAR Cup car this weekend, or last weekend, he was in a wreck at Pocono during qualifying and backed the car into the wall, but it didn't look like that bad of an impact, but he got a concussion from it. And, you know, I'm a big fan of containment seats and well-built roll cages and all that stuff, but even having the best, you can still get hurt racing. Racing is dangerous. Thankfully for us, at least during my lifetime, racing injuries have been on the decline, especially severe racing injuries or, you know, somebody getting really hurt in a race car. So, you know, I think we kind of lose track of just how dangerous racing can be. But our goal is to make the cars as safe as we possibly can, and that's what we do at KSR.
Whew. All right. Well, the back behind the main hoop is done. Decided to go ahead and keep cranking on it while I was moving forward in a good way. I don't even know what I'm saying. I'm tired. But kept making the right notches and the bars kept fitting really good. So I thought I would just keep on cranking until at least I got that back section done. And there's one thing left to do. That's not going anywhere. See you guys next time.